Growing up as the middle child in a family of legal royalty meant learning early that silence was a shield. I will never forget the hush that fell over dinner when my father, Judge Marcus Reed, cleared his throat and leaned forward to deliver his verdict. "Elijah," he said, the single word carrying more weight than any sentence I'd ever heard in his courtroom. "You need direction." My mother, Celeste, the celebrated prosecutor, whose courtroom presence could command a jury before she even opened her folder, nodded at his side. Their expectations were pillars surrounding me, and I was trapped in the narrow corridor between them. My eldest brother, Bennett, had always known his path. From his first year of college campus tours, he aspired to medical school. By 16, he'd already interned at the state health department. Every accolade he earned was proudly displayed on the trophy wall in the hallway, a monument to his parents' design. Meanwhile, I hovered at the margins, a quiet son who spoke in binary and soldered circuit boards in the garage long after my family's guests had gone home. Even at 9 years old, I sensed their disappointment before they uttered a word. I remember my mother's voice, low and unadorned by warmth. On the morning, I announced that I would rather build computers than memorize case law. She folded her arms, eyebrows raised. "You have a mind for justice, Elijah," she said, as though I just confessed a crime rather than professed my passion. Their love was conditional on my compliance with a vision I'd never shared. I watched Bennett receive praise for leading the Charity Gala Committee, a role I might have relished in my own way, but never dared to pursue. Instead, when I came home with a hand-drawn poster advertising my first homemade coding club after school, my father dismissed it with a single wave of his hand. "That's not a real career, son." Silence became my refuge. While Bennett practiced speeches to address donors, I retreated beneath the staircase where cardboard boxes held my secret projects. A rudimentary weather station I'd pieced together. At 12 lines of code scribbled on scraps of paper. At 14, a prototype for a home automation system powered by a repurposed FPGA board. I barely talked about these inventions because their lack of nod, their sideways glances of disinterest, taught me that my dreams were invisible. I learned to walk into rooms and blend into the background, to laugh at jokes about my career ambiguity, to nod politely when relatives asked me, "So, what do you do nowadays?" I would manage an expression of earnest uncertainty. I'm exploring some possibilities. And down the line, Bennett went collecting congratulations while I collected unsent emails to venture capitalists and half-finished lines of code. Still, paradoxically, this enforced quiet forged my resilience. In the solitude of my basement workspace, I discovered a discipline that thrived without applause. Late nights spent debugging stubborn lines of JavaScript made me acutely aware of the power of persistence. Every time a program finally ran without errors, I felt a surge of satisfaction greater than any trophy Bennett had hung on his wall. These moments, when the lights flickered on in my custom control panel, or when my weather station correctly predicted the morning frost, were my victories, privately celebrated in the soft hum of cooling fans. I began to understand that success didn't require a parent's approval, only a willingness to keep trying when no one was watching. But adolescence is as much about identity as invention, and the silence I wore like armor sometimes felt like chains. At family gatherings, I watched Bennett take the stage with ease, and I found myself envying not only his success, but the certainty of his path. When I attended mock trial competitions in high school, my mother's domain, her comfort zone, I excelled at research and argumentation. But the moment I stood to speak, my voice trembled. Each sentence felt like an act of defiance against the person I was expected to become. And in that tension, I realized that no amount of persuasion could reforge my true self. I wanted to shape code, not court cases, to architect software, not legal briefs. The defining moment came on the evening of my high school graduation, the ceremony. Hall buzzed with anticipation as my fellow graduates accepted diplomas with practiced smiles. My parents sat in the front row, beaming as Bennett's classmates received accolades and promised to carry on the family legacy. When my name echoed over the loudspeaker, I walked the stage with a calm resolve. In my gown pocket, I carried the application to the State University's computer science program, and I was prepared to declare in the face of every expectant gaze that I would pursue a path uncharted by Reed tradition. As I shook hands with the principal and glimpsed my parents' expressions, first confusion, then a flicker of something like wonder, I felt the weight of their expectations slip away. I was no longer the silent observer under their thumb. I was Elijah Reed, builder of my own future. And so, under their roof and beneath their gaze, I learned the greatest lesson they never intended to teach me. That the truest measure of success is not how loudly the world applauds, but how faithfully you follow the quiet call of your own ambitions. Every time I walked down the hallway, my gaze was drawn to the trophy wall, a gleaming array of glass awards engraved, plaques and framed certificates celebrating Bennett's every accomplishment. The polished wood reflected the overhead lights, and I could see my own shadows stretching past those trophies, the boxes of my projects hidden beneath the stairs, receding into darkness. At 13, I had taught myself to code. At 16, I built an event, planning software for our high school. At 19, I pitched Medscope to a panel of angel investors, but none of that ever made it onto display. My achievements were packed away in cardboard cartons, each labeled with pencil dates and project names, stacked in the basement where noon checked. I remember the afternoon I first noticed the disparity. I'd returned from a regional coding competition with a bronze medal tapped into my backpack pocket. The judges had commended my algorithm's efficiency and awarded me for innovative problem solving. My heart swelled with pride as I approached the trophy wall, expecting to see a new spot for my medal. Instead, I found room had been carved out only for Bennett's latest biology fair first place. "Nice work, Elijah," my father said over dinner, his tone polite but clipped. "But you know, medicine is a more stable profession." He glanced at Bennett's plaque as though seeking reinforcement. I swallowed my excitement and nodded, tucking my medal into my pocket. Stability to them equaled safety, not passion. Behind those perceptions lay the storage box where I kept the real proof of my ambition. Beneath the staircase, dust motes danced in the faint beam of the single bare bulb, illuminating blueprints, circuit boards, and spiral-bound notebooks filled with code snippets. There was the first iteration of my event planner, lines of JavaScript covered in coffee stains, and the prototype of a remote health monitoring device I built at 17. I'd shipped that prototype to a small clinic in the Midwest, hoping to test real-world feedback, but the only response I received was a form letter of thanks. The clinic director loved the idea, but lacked the budget. That letter now sat inside the box, a reminder that my work mattered, even if no one in my own family realized it. I spent countless evenings down there, headphones on, tuning circuitry, rewriting functions, dreaming of a day when my projects would sit alongside Bennett trophies. Sometimes I imagined replacing one of his plaques with my own. Elijah Reed, Medscope. Founder, Healthcare Innovation Award, and watching my parents' expression shift from polite approval to genuine awe. But I never acted on that fantasy. Instead, I returned each prototype and scrap of code to its box, sealed it with packing tape, and let the clasp snap shut, tucking the lid beneath a larger box of old files. Silence became my fortress, the box, my sanctuary. When I turned 18 and launched Medscope in secret, I carried that box with me to college. My roommate thought it was full of textbooks. In truth, it held the building blocks of my startup, market research notes, early wireframes, and a rudimentary database of healthcare providers. I rarely opened it on campus, preferring to work in the computer lab where no one knew my last name. There, I coded into the early morning hours, fueled by ramen and determination. I watched as my user base grew, metrics climbed, and pilot programs launched. Successes that filled my heart more than any parental praise ever could. Yet, I kept the box locked in my dorm closet, an artifact of my hidden life. My parents finally noticed something when I invited them to a demo during a holiday visit. I set up my laptop at the dining table, opened Medscope's dashboard, and walked them through encrypted messaging threads between doctors and patients. I showed statistics: reduced response times, improved patient satisfaction, lower readmission rates. My mother's eyes softened as she leaned forward. "This is impressive," she murmured, tracing the graphs with her finger. My father straightened his tie and nodded. For a moment, I saw the pride I'd craved reflected back at me. Then my mother's gaze lifted to the trophy wall where Bennett's newest accolade gleamed. "Why wasn't this on the wall?" she asked. The question felt like a verdict reversed. That evening, after the guests dispersed, my mother found me in the basement, the single bulb still glowing. She fingered the dusty boxes. "Show me everything," she said. For the first time, I pulled out each notebook, prototype, and scrappy letter explaining the evolution of every project. She listened without interrupting, nodding at key moments, asking questions about coding languages and user interface design. My father joined us, arms crossed, but attentive. They stayed until the bulb flickered, illuminating my buried dreams in pale light. When I finally closed the last notebook, my mother brushed the dust from its cover and said, "We should put all of this on that wall." I felt a swell of validation so powerful it knocked the breath from me lungs. The next morning, I helped them clear a section of the hall. We hung framed screenshots of my apps, mounted prototypes in shadow boxes, and engraved a new plaque. Elijah Reed, innovator and founder of Medscope. My brother peered around the corner, blinking at the new additions. In that moment, the trophy wall transformed from a monument to Bennett alone into a testament to our family's collective potential. And the storage box, once a symbol of what I'd hidden, became an artifact of the journey that brought me from silence to recognition. Under their roof, and once under their thumb, I had carved out my place. And at last, my work shone in plain view. I met Nora during my junior year of college at a hackathon held in the cavernous student center, where fluorescent lights hummed overhead and clusters of programmers hunched over laptops. She was the only person who challenged my code with intelligent questions instead of polite nods. Her mind moved like quicks. She'd volley logic puzzles at me between lines of Python, and I found myself drawn to her spark. By dawn, we had not only debugged my event planning algorithm, but also sketched out the seed of Medcope on a napkin stained with half-drunk coffee. In that moment, I realized two things. First, that someone finally understood why I chose the soft glow of a monitor over the glare of courtroom spotlights. And second, that I was falling in love. Our early days were a whirlwind of late-night coding sessions and shared takeout boxes scattered across my dorm room floor. While Bennett pored over medical textbooks back home, Nora and I collaborated on data models and user interfaces fueled by determination and cheap caffeine. We built prototypes on borrowed servers, sending MVP links to friends for testing. When I hesitated, fearing my parents' judgment, she refused to let doubt derail us. "If your vision only matters to you, you're building in a vacuum," she said, her eyes alike. "Let's build something that matters to others." Under her encouragement, I pitched Medscope to professors, local clinics, and any potential mentor who would listen, though most responded with polite no's. Each rejection taught us to refine features, tighten security, and optimize performance. By senior year, we moved into a cramped one-bedroom apartment just off campus. Its walls lined with white bars filled with flowcharts and feature lists. The place smelled perpetually of takeout containers and whiteboard markers. My parents never visited. Back home, I told them I was between jobs. I didn't correct them when. My father chuckled over dinner with his legal colleagues that I'd probably settle into something stable. Stability to meant lack of impact. Drawing from my mother's courtroom tenacity and my father's demand for precision, insisted that Medscope adhere to the highest standards of data privacy and user experience. Nora matched my drive, waking me at 6 a.m. to optimize server scripts before we headed to our respective classes, hers in data science, mine in software engineering. When graduation arrived, our small team of 3 interns and 1 mentor launched a pilot at a regional clinic, enabling doctors to message patients securely about follow-up appointments and prescription questions. Within weeks, error rates dropped, patient satisfaction spiked, and clinicians praised the platform's simplicity. I sat in silence at our celebratory dinner, overwhelmed by pride, but afraid to share the news at home. The next morning, my phone buzzed with congratulatory emails from our mentor network. I replayed those notifications in my mind, savoring them like a private treasure, while my parents exchanged routines about Bennett's residency applications and upcoming interviews. In the months that followed, Nora and I poured every dollar of our limited savings back into Medcope. We hired our first full-time developer and a UX designer, working from a tiny co-working space that smelled of stale coffee and ambition. While Bennett married his fiancée in a ceremony that made headlines in local society pages, I stayed behind a closed laptop, refining encryption protocols, and negotiating our seed investment. My parents received only an email invitation to the ceremony, an invitation they declined without explanation. I understood their distance as a mixture of misunderstanding and the unspoken belief that I was still exploring options. So I continued to build. My relationship with Nora deepened beyond code. We balanced whiteboard sessions with lazy Sunday brunches, and she celebrated my small victories with handwritten notes tucked into my laptop bag. On evenings when endless bug fixes threatened to overwhelm me, she reminded me why we started this venture: to improve patient care through seamless communication. "You're not building software," she said, once as we watched the city skyline from our apartment roof. "You're building trust." Those words stitched themselves into my resolve, cementing our partnership, not only as co-founders, but as life partners. Yet despite our progress, doubts still gnawed at me. I longed to tell my parents the full story, to watch their faces when they saw how Medcope was changing lives. But I feared their expectations would warp my success into another benchmark of family pride rather than a testament to our shared vision. Then came the day we signed a 7-figure contract with a private hospital network for enterprise deployment. Nora cried tears of relief. I sat speechless, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I wanted to celebrate with my parents to see them beam with approval. Instead, I sent a polite email summarizing the news. Their reply: "Congratulations on your brother's match to the cardiology fellowship." That night, after our small champagne toast, Nora took my hand. "They'll come around," she said. "But your journey isn't theirs to define." Her confidence steadied me. In that moment, I realized that our mission, even when misunderstood, was worth every silent sacrifice. I understood that family expectations would shift only when the impact of our work became undeniable. So Nora and I continued building day by day, line by line, knowing that one day our voices would echo louder than any doubt, and that when they did, we would be ready to speak on behalf of every patient and provider who relied on our platform. 3 years. Into building Medscope, Nora and I had settled into our rhythm of controlled chaos. Our tiny office buzzed with the steady click of keyboards as our first full-time developers tackled feature requests and squashed bugs. Late one afternoon, I sat at my desk reviewing the latest user metrics when my phone vibrated with an email notification from Horizon Systems, a private hospital network I'd assumed was far too large to notice a small startup like ours. My heart caught in my throat as I opened the message. They wanted to schedule a call to discuss potential collaboration and enterprise licensing. I replayed the words over and over, wary that I had misread something. Horizon was a titan in our industry, a name whispered in the hushed hallways of healthcare conferences. They had piloted our platform in 3 of their clinics, but I had expected our relationship toned with polite feedback and perhaps a letter of recommendation. Instead, they were proposing a 7-figure licensing deal. Sweat beaded at my temples as I stared at the numbers. More Zeros than I had ever imagined seeing in my bank account. My vision for Medcope had always been modest. Solve real problems, one clinic at a time. Yet here was an offer that promised to scale our impact exponentially. I tapped out AirPly, voice unsteady as I thanked them, and proposed times for a call. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I wondered whether to share this news with my parents. For years, I'd kept the specifics of my work hidden, letting them believe I was still finding my way. While Nora and I quietly steered Medcope toward success, I hesitated, then set a thought aside. I needed to focus. On the video call the next morning, I watched the Horizon executives settle into their chairs behind glossy nameplates. They spoke with measured precision, commending our secure messaging features and citing the 40% reduction in patient readmission rates during the pilot. When they outlined the licensing fee, an upfront payment that would cover our operating cost for the next 2 years, I felt both exhilaration and dread. Exhilaration because our years of relentless work were finally bearing fruit. Dread because I realized how little my family truly understood what I had built. After the call ended, I sat back, moments passing before reality settled in. To accept Horizon's offer would mean giving up significant control over Medscope's roadmap. They wanted us to dedicate half our engineering team to custom integrations for their proprietary systems, and they requested a seat on our board of directors. These demands risked slowing our broader vision to expand Medcope into new markets, and develop AI-driven triage features. I closed my eyes and imagined surrendering our independence in exchange for growth. I saw my parents' faces glimpsing their surprise when the numbers hit their ears. Would they finally see me as successful? Or would their questions inevitably shift to, "Have you sold out?" That evening, I found Nora in our apartment kitchen, her laptop open to a draft budget document. I slid into the chair across from her, voice tight. "They want $10 million for a 5-year license," I said. Her eyes widened, then softened as she reached for my hand. "That's incredible," she whispered. "But what do they want in return?" We pored over the contract terms late into the night, tracking every byline and checkbox. The deal was lucrative, but the equity and governance strings weighed heavily. Horizon wanted half our company's board seats, a Vatoon, any new partnerships, and exclusive rights to health network deployments in the eastern region. Over the next week, we negotiated. We insisted on reducing their board representation to a single seat, preserving our ability to steer product direction. We pushed back on exclusivity clauses, arguing that limiting our market would stifle growth. As co-founders, Nora and I found our resolve tested. We debated heatedly over dilution percentages and long-term vision. Finally, we reached a middle ground. Horizon would receive $8 million, 2 board seats, and non-exclusive licensing rights, allowing us to pursue other networks and international trials. When we signed the term sheet, I felt a surge of triumph, tempered by relief. I closed my laptop with a soft click and leaned back, imagining the look on my parents' faces when I told them. My stomach fluttered with both excitement and anxiety. I rehearsed a simple announcement. "Mom, Dad, I have news. Medscope just closed a major enterprise deal with Horizon Systems." But the next morning, as I walked through our front door, I faltered. At the sight of my father in his study, reviewing case files, and my mother arranging flowers in the living room, my announcement felt sudden, too big for the quiet morning light. Instead, I settled at the kitchen table and brewed coffee. The aroma filled the space as I slid the signed agreement across to Nora. She grinned, eyes shining. "We did it," she said. Inaudible, stirring sugar into my mock. I realized I had to tell my parents soon, but first I needed the right moment, one where their world wasn't occupied by courtroom strategies or gala planning. That evening, after dinner, I cleared my throat. My parents paused mid-conversation about Bennett's residency interviews. I slid a printed copy of the agreement across the table. "I have something to share," I began. Their eyes lifted, curious. I watched my mother's gaze drift over the document, linger on the Horizon logo, then return to my face. My father folded the page, brow furrowing. "Medscope?" he asked. Inaudible, voice sure. "We've signed a multi-million-dollar licensing deal for a..." Heartbeat. Silence reigned. Then my mother exhaled, a smile blooming. "Elijah," she said, voice proud. "Tell us everything." As I recounted the negotiations, the late nights, and the future we envisioned, I saw their skepticism melt away, replaced by genuine wonder. My father leaned forward, asking about integration timelines. My mother's eyes sparkled as she grasped the potential impact on patient care. In that moment, I understood that the deal they never knew about had become the proof they finally needed, that, under their roof and beneath their expectations, I had built something that truly mattered. The day Horizon Systems called, everything changed. I was sitting at my desk in the narrow co-working space Nora and I had outgrown months ago, squinting at lines of code that refused to compile, when my phone buzzed with a notification that made my heart skip. The email had a read simply, "Horizon Systems inquiry," and the body contained just a few sentences. They wanted to discuss purchasing Medscope for $180 million. In that moment, the den of clacking keys and hushed conversations around me blurred into white noise. I reread the offer, each digit of that staggering sum etching itself into my mind, and felt an electric surge of possibility. I could almost taste the freedom the money promised, a chance to clear debts, to hire a deeper bench of engineers, to explore features I'd shelved for lack of resources. Yet, beneath the swirl of excitement, a knot of hesitation tightened in my chest. Nora found me hunched over my laptop, eyes wide and done blinking as the cursor on the draft reply blinked back at me. "They want to buy us out," I whispered, voice barely audible in the hushed office. She leaned in, her dark hair slipping over one shoulder, and read the email over my shoulder. Her brow furrowed, then lifted in recognition of what this meant. An exit before the real mission was complete. We talked in low tones as colleagues passed our table without noticing. The months of blood and code of midnight debugging sessions and endless pitches distilled into a single phone call. Could we really hand over the reins when our vision for Medscope's future still burned bright? By the time the scheduled conference call flickered onto my screen, I had rehearsed my responses a dozen times. The Horizon executives appeared in crisp video frames, suits, and nameplates and practice smiles. They opened by praising Medscope's impact. How it had slashed communication errors in their pilot clinics, how patients rated it higher than any prior messaging tool, how administrators lauded our intuitive interface. Then they laid out the acquisition terms. $180 million payable upon closing, the lead negotiator said. Voice steady and confident. We believe this valuation reflects Medscope's proven performance and Horizon-wide potential. We'd like to integrate your technology into our entire network immediately. I felt heat rush to my face as I nodded, forcing a measured tone. Thank you, I said. But Nora and I have more work to do. We envision expanding Medscope's capabilities with AI-driven triage and multilingual support. We'd like to retain full control of development to fulfill that vision. A flicker of surprise crossed the executive's face. We can adjust, he replied after a beat. What would it take to keep you both on board? What equity stake and governance structure would satisfy you? Nora and I exchanged glances, silent communication, tempered by adrenaline. We spent the next hour outlining our priorities, funding to accelerate R&D, a minority investment rather than full acquisition, and a commitment to maintain our existing leadership team. By the end of the call, Horizon agreed to return with adjusted terms. When the email arrived 2 weeks later, I opened it with both anticipation and dread. They offered $120 million plus an ongoing equity investment vesting over 5 years with a minority board seat for each of us, and Nora and I built Medscope day by day, line by line, always knowing that our voices would one day echo louder than any doubt. 3 years in, we'd settled into a rhythm of controlled chaos. Our tiny office hummed with the sounds of keyboards, clicking as we tackled feature requests and bug fixes. Late one afternoon, as I reviewed user metrics, my phone buzzed with an email from Horizon Systems, a hospital network I had assumed was too big to notice a startup like ours. My heart skipped as I opened the message. Horizon wanted to discuss collaboration and licensing. I read the words again, unsure of what I was seeing. Horizon, a titan in the healthcare industry, had piloted our platform in a few clinics, and now they were offering a 7-figure licensing deal. The zeros on the screen made my vision blur, and I hesitated, wondering if I'd misread the offer. When the video call with Horizon executives took place the next morning, the reality sank in. They praised our platform's features and the 40% reduction in patient readmission rates during their pilot. They outlined the terms, a massive licensing fee, but in return, they wanted substantial control. They proposed dedicating half our engineering team to custom integrations for their proprietary systems and a seat on our board. The prospect of scaling our impact felt exhilarating, but I realized this would mean giving up a great deal of control over Medscope's future. I had built this from scratch, and now I was being asked to hand over the reins. That night, I sat with Nora in our apartment reviewing the terms. We knew this deal could change everything, but it came with strings attached. After negotiating terms with Horizon over the next week, we reached a compromise. They would invest $8 million, taking 2 board seats, but leaving us the flexibility to pursue other markets and opportunities. When we signed the term sheet, I felt a surge of triumph and relief. Yet the thought of telling my parents still lingered. I had kept the specifics of my work hidden from them, letting them believe I was still finding my way. But now, I had to share the news. The following morning, I finally sat my parents down and told them about the deal. Their initial silence gave way to pride and genuine wonder. My father asked detailed questions about integration timelines, and my mother's eyes sparkled as she grasped the potential impact on patient care. For the first time, they saw what I had built, not just a startup, but something that mattered. But as we settled into our new phase with Horizon, things took an unexpected turn. Another email arrived, this time offering to buy Medscope outright for $180 million. The offer was staggering. The chance for financial freedom, the ability to hire more engineers, and the opportunity to fast-track the features we'd shelved for lack of resources was tempting. But there was also a sense of unfinished business, a burning desire to take Medscope further than this. Nora and I discussed the offer in hushed tones, the weight of the decision sinking in. Could we really sell out now, before we had fully realized our vision? The video call with Horizon came soon after. The executives praised our platform's impact, pointing out how it had slashed communication errors and how patients preferred it over any other messaging tool. Then they laid out the terms of the buyout, $180 million payable at closing, with immediate integration into their network. I listened carefully, but deep down, I knew that selling now would mean giving up everything we had worked for. When Horizon asked what it would take to keep us on board, Nora and I exchanged glances. We laid out our terms: funding to accelerate, R&D, a minority investment, and a commitment to keeping our leadership team intact. Horizon agreed to the terms, and the deal was back on the table, but with the adjusted offer of $120 million plus ongoing equity investment over the next 5 years. We were faced with a decision: take the money and secure our financial future, or continue the journey, risking everything for a vision that still felt unfinished. In the end, we chose the latter. Medscope had grown beyond just a product. It was about changing the healthcare system and improving patient outcomes. We weren't ready to let go just yet,